everybody. Let's record this sucker and let's get after it. So, welcome everyone. If it's your first time here showing up, thank you for buying the study guide. This is the bundle package. So with that, you're going to get 2 Zoom calls we have every other week. We will go over the NASM textbook cover to cover, answer any questions that you guys have. The more questions and the more that you want out of it, the more you're going to get out of it. I typically will bring a beer or 2. Once I'm done with them, then we're over. So if you are not familiar with Show Up Fitness, we teach personal trainers. We have in-person internships in La Jolla, West Hollywood, and Santa Monica. 2-month classes where you get hands-on learning Monday through Friday, 90-minute portions, and then we also have an online. So whether if you're in Texas, Louisiana, wherever you're at, we have an online portion, 90 minutes a day. Monday through Thursday, we go over anatomy, movement, nothing related to NASM. This is all on how to train properly, programming, and then on Thursdays we do our assessments. So today we went over blood pressure and body fat and grip strength and how to sell. And on Fridays we do social media with Danny. So if you've not taken our or sat in on one of our classes, feel free to DM me, email me tomorrow at 8 a.m. California time. It's so funny, people don't know what PST stands for. So tomorrow at 8 a.m. we will have Danny offering a class. So if you want to sit on that, you're more than welcome to. It will be free. If you have, like I said, if you guys have any questions, feel free to shoot. So NASM CPT, 120 questions. You can take this still remotely at the comfort of your home. Let me mute everyone real quick. Feel free to chime in whenever you want to. But the exam is 120 questions. You are given 2 hours to take it. 20 of the questions are beta tests, so you don't know which ones those are. The exam is going to be 6, 7, and 14, 19, and 20. That's the big bulk of it. Make sure, just because you have the study guide does not mean you're going to pass. I talked to a kid yesterday, and we've had over 1,000 people pass, less than 5 people fail. This was my 4th kid. So I always like to chat with them to find out where they were having struggles, and this kid was all fervor, and he was like, it wasn't like you said on the study guide and blah, blah, blah. He starts getting all fired up. I said, oh, that's all right. You get another try for free. NASM will give everyone a trial, another one to take for free. You just have to call and complain and say COVID gives you like PTSD or something, and they'll let it take you for free. And when I start talking to him about how well he knows the information, I start quizzing him a little bit. And for the life of him, he couldn't get anything on the acute variables for chapter 14. He didn't know the difference between phase 3 and phase 1. He didn't know the overactive, underactive muscles for the overhead squat. So just because you have our study guide and you read it one time, it doesn't mean you're automatically going to pass. And we had someone spend 28 days, 2 hours a day, just with our study guide, not the textbook, just with the study guide, and they passed. Let me just reiterate what I just said, 2 hours a day. So they really focus on what we have in there with the flashcards. I know we get testing anxiety and we want to know everything from cover to cover. You don't need to know everything from cover to cover. There's a ton of information in this textbook that's outdated. I've taught this stuff for over 7 years. The school that I taught at it was a 6-month program. This is the material they used. I linked up with a lot of high officials at NASM, and I can get anyone to pass it. You just have to focus on exactly what they say in our study guide. And so, yeah, there's some stuff in here that's important. Knowing what are the actions of the shoulder, flexion, extension, supination, pronation, external rotation. That's all fun to know, but you're not going to be tested on it. NASM's not going to ask you, what is the agonist for shoulder flexion? They're not going to ask you, what does the supraspinatus do? You don't need to know the origins and insertions and the actions. They're not going to ask you any of that. They're going to ask you specifically on page 196 the differences in overactive and underactive muscles. That's going to be the bulk of the test. They're going to ask you some questions about their specific exercises. Sure. Which phase, the OPT model, would you implement a prone iso ab? So that's their name for a plank. And if you didn't know what a prone iso ab is, you're going to freak out and you're probably going to choose the wrong answer. So there's 3 parts of the OPT model: stabilization, strength, and power. You need to know that the test is going to ask you essentially, is it easy, is it moderate, or is it hard? That's how you break down the OPT model. Easy is going to be something that most people probably wouldn't do. Some type of stability ball, Bosu ball, single arm, 4-2-1 exercise that is just not applicable to the average person, but that's what NASM wants you to know. When it comes to strength, phases 2, 3, and 4, you need to know the acute variables within that. And then same with 5. And so before I start going over the textbook, some of these portions I'm going to go over very fast because you don't need to know much. So for example, I'd like to start on page, I always screw up Roman numerals, V, which I think is 5. If you want to follow on in the textbook, this is before we get into chapter 1. Professionalism. They always ask this question, number 7C. Refer the client to the appropriate medical practitioner when, at the minimum, a certified or non-certified member becomes aware of any unusual client pain or discomfort during the course of the training session that warrants professional care after the session has been discontinued. They love that question. So you will probably see that one. So getting into, let's see this one here. Oh, I found you. I always talk about that one, but I can't find you. All right. You guys just got a bonus point today. So on 6, business practices, they love this question on number 6. Business practices, page 6, whatever, VI. Maintain accurate financial contract appointment and tax records, including original receipts, for how long? 1, 2, 3, or 4 years. It's a minimum of 4 years. They love that question. You guys just got a bonus point for that one. All right, so chapter 1. Skip it. You don't need to know anything because they review it again. So that's why you don't need to waste your time. Chapter 2, this stuff's, I love this stuff. We spend the majority of our internship going over the 14 systems of the human body. I require interns to know the difference between anabolic hormones, catabolic hormones, how you release them, what's the lymphatic system, digestive system. NASM doesn't want you to know that stuff. Why? Because it's challenging. Stuff that's challenging, there's a greater likelihood you're not going to pass it. And if you don't pass it, NASM knows that most people will probably not continue on to get more certifications. NASM is a profit organization. They make a shit ton of money off the more certs that you get. I was just talking to a guy today, and he got scammed into the $2,500 deal. It's okay. It's not like you're a bad person. If you bought 15 certs for their little bundle, Black Friday deal, whatever, if you can get a refund, get a refund. But don't worry about it. Don't chase more certs. But that's how they make their money. So they're not going to quiz you a lot on what is the basic unit for the nervous system. That's just not in their ballpark. They're not going to ask you that. They're going to ask you stuff about something that they love, the mechanoreceptors. So we'll go over this again, but on page 22, the spindles, the Golgi tendon, and the joint receptors. They love asking simple questions about, like, what would be a bone question they'd ask you? How many bones are in the cervical region? That would be like an advanced question according to NASM. I like the little, I forget what the thing's called, the synonym, whatever, but you have breakfast at 7, you have lunch at 12, you have dinner at 5. So you have 7 in the cervical region, you have 12 in the thoracic region, and then you have 5 lumbar. They're not going to ask you anything about the specific joints or what they're doing. On page 37, they like asking about what planes of, which of the following joint types can get into all 3 planes of motion. So you should know that the ball and socket gets into all 3 planes of motion. This is pretty rudimentary when it comes to physiology, but you should know the difference between a ligament and a tendon. Think of your Achilles tendon as muscle to bone. It goes from your, so I think a great trainer is going to know the difference between what that tendon does. So the Achilles, which is your gastroc and your soleus, they go into the calcaneus bone. NASM's not going to ask you that. They're just going to ask you what is a tendon. So just know that it's muscle to bone. A ligament is bone to bone. Think of your ACL. And they're not going to ask you anything on like the motor units or actin and myosin. That's all fabulous stuff, but they're not going to ask you anything about that. Something that would be complex according to NASM would be chapter 245. Which type of athlete would have primarily type 1 muscle fibers? So a rower, a marathon runner, a swimmer, or a football player. It's that black and white. So type 1 muscle fibers are going to be more aerobic. They use fat. It's oxidation, more capillaries. Type 2 would be more powerful, explosive anaerobic carbs as the fuel source. So essentially what I just said right there is what's the misfit? We had 3 that are more aerobic, which would be the endurance athletes, and then the power lifter / football player, basketball player would be more type 2. And that's on page 45. It's just good for your own knowledge to know the difference between the agonist and synergist. I like to break it down. Like when you do a bench press, you're pushing. So what are the two main muscles? You have your chest and your tricep. Now play a game. If both of those were to play a game together, a basketball match, who would win? The chest would win the basketball game. So it's a bigger muscle. So your chest is the agonist, the tricep is the synergist. The stabilizers will always be your sits or your rotator cuff muscles, whereas the core will be for the lower body. The antagonist is the opposite. They like to stick to just the main mover and the synergist, and that's going to be on page 46. They're not going to get into any crazy examples like, what's the agonist during a Turkish get-up? No, it's very simple. They're going to say your client's performing a lat pull-down. What is the antagonist? Antagonist is the opposite. Like in film, the bad character is the antagonist. So if I'm pulling down, that's the agonist, which would be my lats. So the opposite would be a press, shoulder press, or your deltoids. They're not going to ask you anything on hormones, but just for your own knowledge, if you want to know that catabolic hormones would be glucagon and cortisol, anabolic would be HGH, insulin, testosterone, and I think that's the 4 that they're going to quiz you on. Yeah. All right, so before I get into chapter 3, do you guys have any questions? Could be anything related to NASM, any questions you have on testing anxiety, when you plan on taking it. I encourage you guys to take it within a month. Don't spend much longer than a month going through this. You need to get experience ASAP, and so that's what you're going to get by getting out there. Chapter 3, so every chapter we'll kind of stop for any questions you guys have. You can skim through this one pretty quickly. Difference between the atriums and the ventricles. The atriums are on top, ventricles are on the bottom. Pumping chambers are the ventricles, the holding chambers are the atriums. The SA node is the pacemaker. And the average heart rate, 70 to 80. 70 for, screw that one up. 70 for males, 75 for females. And then capillaries, arteries. They like asking about venules. So on page 61, the question they would ask, which of the following connective tissue are very small veins that connect capillaries to larger veins? Venules would be the answer for that one. So I'll just flashcard it. Anytime I make a specific on the side ones, I would just flashcard them. Veins go towards the heart, arteries go away from the heart. That's like the most advanced stuff they would ask you in chapter 3. Chapter 4, you could skip that one. They're not going to ask anything on there. That's too complex. Bioenergetics is awesome stuff. Why is a sprinter jacked? Why is a marathon runner smaller? But they're not going to ask you anything. They may ask you like a complex one if you want to get real nerdy. Know what glycogen is, which is stored glucose. Gluconeogenesis is the regeneration or the formation of new glucose from non-carbohydrate substrates. Those are 2 ones that they may ask you. Just think of a power lifter, a sprinter, a long jumper, triple jumper, high jumper, 100 meter, 200 meter. Those are all ATP PC, and anyone that does long distance will be oxidation. If you really want to nerd out, they do like to ask like one question about what comes after slow glycolysis. It's going to be, so aerobic glycolysis would be the answer. So just know that it goes aerobic glycolysis, Krebs cycle, electron transport chain. So I get a lot of people asking, like, what you're telling me this stuff isn't important. No, I'm not saying it's not important. This summary of bioenergetics is not up to date. We have a lot of suggestions for more up-to-date ones from professors like Dr. Waterbury. He's a professor at USC. He goes into some great stuff on bioenergetics and the size principle. NASM doesn't want you to get too in-depth into chapter 4 because it's convoluted, so don't get too hung up on it. Now, chapter 5 would be a better one just for your own knowledge because the way that they'll speak, and when you read an anatomy textbook, they're going to talk about superior, inferior, what those terms mean. So superior means above, inferior is below, proximal is the closest point of origin, distal is furthest point away. The planes of motion, I would just highlight on page 85 and flashcard the actual terms of the names. So know what sagittal is. It's an imaginary bisector that divides the body into left and right halves. You should know what that is. For frontal, it's an imaginary bisector dividing the body into front and back, whereas transverse is superior and inferior halves, or bottom and halves, bottom and top. They're not going to ask you like, what is the definition of extension? No, they're going to ask you specifically about those planes of motion. I always think it's funny, on page 90, they say there's only 4 actions of the scapula right now in class. We just started our shoulder anatomy, our 2-month internship, and there's not 4, there's 8. So NASM doesn't really even want you to know all the actions of the shoulder. It's just a fun little side note. You breathe out when you are pressing. That's the concentric portion. So concentric is when the muscle shortens. Eccentric is when it lengthens. We are stronger eccentrically. If you want to know the definition of isokinetic, that's a good one to throw down. It's when a muscle shortens at a constant speed. It's a machine that they will use like in a clinical setting. So isokinetic is a muscle action that shortens at a constant speed. And if you want to nerd out on page 97, just write down the fulcrums and the levers. You don't need to know exactly what biomechanics isn't easy stuff. They like to know about like a force couple. They'll always ask about just the upper traps, lower traps, and the serratus anterior. They're not going to ask anything outside of that, but they will ask about like nodding the head as an example of what type of lever. That would be class 1. Class 2 would be a calf raise, and class 3 would be a bicep curl. So just flashcard those. You could do 1, the difference in levers. So class 1, 2, and 3, know that 1 is going to be nodding your head, 2 is going to be a calf raise, 3 would be a bicep curl. And the reason I go through some of this stuff pretty fast, like especially chapters 3, 4, and 5, is they might ask you maybe 2 questions total. So if you're spending hours trying to memorize blood flow and what happens after the left ventricle when a artery goes into a capillary, that's good stuff to know, but don't overwhelm yourself and create anxiety for the exam. Just focus on those words that I told you to flashcard, and then get into the more important things such as chapter 6. And that is what we're going to get into next. This is a big chapter, so you guys have any questions before we get into it? Lively group today, love it. All right, so chapter 6, you got to know the assessment. So you have subjective and objective information. That's what we're going over in class today. So the subject is going to give you information such as what they do, their occupation, personal information, how long they're sitting, blah, blah, blah. That's subjective information. Or objective, you, the trainer, obtain it. You're bringing it to you. So you're gathering that information, such as a bicep measurement, blood pressure, calipers. You are getting that information. You're doing the overhead squat assessment. You are doing the performance test. So they're not going to, they may ask you 1 or 2 on those. Nothing about that stuff. No. They may ask you something on 119 about the zones. So flashcard that. Zone 1 is going to be, so it's 220 minus your age, and then the zone you'll do is 0.65 to 7.5, 2.76 to 8.5, and then 3.86 to 9.5. 119, just write down those zones. For body comp, it's good to know blood pressure 140 over 90 is hypertension. You want it to be less than that. Body comp, 4 sites according to NASM is the Durnin-Wormsley formula, which is bicep, tricep, suprailiac, and subscap. Supra is on the back, and your subscap there. Thank you, Sean. If you want to sit in a class tomorrow, we have our social media with Danny, so feel free to hop in on that tomorrow. Just shoot me a DM. And moving along to the measurements, on page 128, they like to ask about the waist to hip ratio. Greater than 0.8 for women, greater than 0.95 for men. You should know what BMI is. It is your mass, which is in kilograms, over your height in meters squared. 24.9 to 18.5 is normal. Above 25 is overweight. Obese is 30 plus. We love asking the question right here in the summary on 129. The chance of having obesity-related health problems potentially increase when a person's BMI exceeds what level? And what they'll do there is they're going to put in 20, 23, 25, and 30. And people will be inclined to choose 30, but that's not the right answer. The right answer will be 25. 2 cardio tests, YMCA step test, and then the Rockport. Again, know the zones. And then on page 131, they'll ask about where they would begin. So if your client is below average, that's going to be zone 1. If they are good, zone 2. Excellent will be zone 3 on page 171. Alrighty, getting into the magical, mystical, unicorn pronation distortion syndromes. After you pass the test, watch some videos from the prehab guys and I. They are physical therapists out of USC. They are top PTs in the nation, and we debunk a lot of the stuff from Dr. Didn't have it good, Dr. Jonda. It's a physical therapist in the early 20s. And this stuff is still prevalent today, all about posture. If you don't have perfect posture, you're gonna die tomorrow. It's a great way to scare your clients, but if you want to be a successful trainer, we don't need to scare the shit out of them by diagnosing them with upper cross syndrome or anything like that. Don't worry about the muscles that are overactive and underactive now. We will identify those in a second. On 137, you need to know the kinetic chain checkpoints. Foot and ankle, knee, LPHC, shoulders, head, and the spine. So we have the overhead squat, we have the single leg squat, we have the push and the pull. Those are the 4 postural tests. And then starting on page 151, you need to know the Davies test, which is going to be 2 pieces of tape on the floor, 36 inches apart. You do that for 15 seconds. Shark scale, they love asking those 4 penalizations, which are going to be 0.1 seconds for non-hopping leg touching the ground. This is on 152. Hands come off the hips, foot go in the wrong square. You don't return to the right square. Don't worry about any of those other ones. So the reason I skipped those, because when you get into chapter 7, you need a flashcard, page 165, relative flexibility. They love that term, the path of least resistance. That's their favorite. 167, you need to know altered reciprocal inhibition, synergistic dominance, muscle spindle, Golgi tendon, joint receptor, autogenic inhibition. Associate Golgi tendon, T for tension, and that's going to be, Golgi tendon is going to be associated with autogenic inhibition. Muscle spindles will be associated with a stretch. Tendon, tension, spindle, stretch. If you want to nerd out and do Davies' Law on 171, that could help. Corrective flexibility is going to be, every flexibility is going to be SMR. NASM makes you SMR, and if you don't have SMR, you're going to die. So you have to make sure everything, you self-myofascial release for 20 to 40 seconds, and then you go into a static stretch for corrective. Active flexibility will be SMR, 20 to 40 seconds, followed by active isolate stretching, which is 1 to 2 second holds. And then functional flexibility is SMR, 20 to 40 seconds, followed by dynamic stretching. A dynamic stretch would be like a prisoner squat. They love asking that one. Flavio, he's asking about getting a used book on Amazon. Just make sure it's the 6th edition. That's the one that they're going to test you on. We've had people pass it without the study guide, without the textbook. A lot of it's kind of common sense, but using the study guide will help you. You don't necessarily need the book, but if you like going through the book, you can. All right, let's turn to page. The most important page probably in the whole entire textbook is 196. So this is the page you need to just memorize. Memorize 196. So what you need to memorize is just the compensation and then the muscles that will be overactive and underactive. If you want to, here, I'll show you guys real quickly on Zoom. Let's share the screen. So if you type in this little trick you guys will have, type in CES chart overactive, underactive. When you type that in, you're going to get this chart right here. Just memorize this chart. You memorize this chart, you have it in the study guide. But this chart is going to be your gold. And what I would do is I would write down every single term and spell it out on the left, the overactive ones. Gastrocnemius, soleus, these are all in the most distal parts of the lower shank. The adductors, which are your inner thighs, your hamstring, your psoas, TFL, rectus femoris, piriformis, which is a deep butt muscle, quadratus lumborum, which is a deep butt muscle, your erector spinae, which is your low back, pec major, pec minor, lats, teres major, which does what the lats do, upper traps, levator scapula, sternocleidomastoid, which is right here, and your scalene. These are all deep muscles of the neck. Underactive, anterior tib, posterior tib. These are on the front part of the calf. VMO, which is your teardrop, the inner part of your quad. I think we know where the max and the med are. TVA, transverse abdominis, are your core muscles. Internal oblique is just your lateral oblique. Multifidi muscles are in the low back. Serratus anterior, right here on the side. And you have your middle lower traps, which are posterior side. Rhomboids are underneath those. Teres minor and prospinatus are rotator cuff muscles. Posterior deltoid and cervical flexor. So what I would write down is every single one of those, one per card. Then what I'll do is I'll just shuffle the fuck out of them. And then what you're going to do is just pick one out and be able to name, is it overactive or underactive? And I would do this every single day. And when you get really good at recognizing piriformis, overactive, internal oblique, underactive, rhomboids, underactive, and you can just start naming them off like that, you're going to pass with flying colors. Because essentially what NASM is going to ask you, and I'm not going to tell you the question, is they're going to ask you, which of the following muscles is overactive? Your serratus anterior, your pectoralis major, your posterior deltoid, or your posterior tibialis. What you saw right there was 1 overactive, 3 underactive. And that's exactly how they're going to ask you. They're not going to pair up 4 overactives. And if they do, they may put 1 on there. If you know the difference between upper body and lower body anatomy, you're gonna crush it. So just if I were to choose a gun to my head, got to take a shot of tequila, which I don't like. 5 overactive muscles you had to memorize. Gastrocnemius, they love. Soleus, they love. Lats, they love. Upper traps, they love. And I'll throw in there the pec major. So pec major, lats, upper trap, psoas, gastroc, they love those being overactive. Underactive, they love the VMO, they love the glutes, they love the TVA, which is transverse abdominis. They love the deep cervical flexors, and then the middle lower traps. Those are the 5 that you need to know. And you will absolutely crush it. Guarantee it.
Hey Chris, I got a quick question for
Yep.
you. What other words do they use for overactive and underactive? Like in their test, they were saying like tight, short, and length, and weak. All this seems like the same thing meaning something else.
Yeah, so overactive is the same as short. Underactive is the same as lengthened. Weak is lengthened. They may say strong, overactive. They're used interchangeably. So when you look at page 196, you'll see that the compensations of overactive, underactive, those are all the muscles that are essentially on that sheet that I just showed you guys. Don't worry about chapter 8. Skip that one. You should know what fit is. It's pretty easy. Frequency, intensity, time, type, enjoyment. The stages, nope, they're not going to ask you on that. Chapter 9, some core concepts. They may ask you the difference between drawing in and bracing, which is on page 229. They love the question on 235. When you're marching, what maneuver are you implementing? And you'll see under 2, it says drawing in. A plank would be a core stabilization. There's no movement in the spine. When there's movement in the spine, that's when it's going to go to strength. What is the ending foot position of a cable rotation? 239. Triple extension, they love that one. And then when you use a ball or some type of power, that would be, or explosiveness, that's going to be power. So again, easy. What would you have mom do? Mom's going to do a plank. What would you and your buddies do? You're going to do a crunch, some type of movement of the spine. What would an athlete do? They're going to do some type of ball throw or explosiveness. Power, strength, stability. Balance training is pretty similar to the prior one. They're not going to ask you much. On page 255, they may ask you the progressions. Just know that a Bosu ball is the most advanced. So you'll see, like, starting on page 254, which of the following would be a stabilization balance exercise? So single leg balance reach, single leg hop rotation, a hip rotation, sorry. When the leg that's on the ground does not move concentrically or eccentrically, that's stabilization. Notice when we move to strength, the leg that's on the ground will begin to move. When that leg moves, it is now strength. 259, single leg Romanian deadlift. The leg is concentrically and eccentrically moving. And then when the base of support moves, that's going to be power. So on 260, 261, power exercises. Do not worry about chapter 11. If you want to memorize, just reactive is the same as plyometric. Why don't you need to worry about chapter 11? Because they want you to get the PES. And amongst professors and academics, the PES it's the CFL compared to the NFL. If you want to be considered a strength coach, you need to get the CSCS. That's through the NSCA. Otherwise, it doesn't hold a candle to it. So 272, if you want to know what amortization is, it's the middle phase of a plyometric. We have concentric, eccentric, and isometric normally, but when we go to power, we have amortization. On page 276, they like to ask about how long you would hold a squat jump with stabilization, 3 to 5 seconds. They like knowing, like, the ice skaters and tuck jumps, those are power exercises. Power exercises. 12 is very similar to 11. They're not going to ask you much because they don't want you to get that. They want you to get the cert. So front side mechanics is triple flexion. Back side mechanics is triple extension. As I said earlier with the cable rotation, the back leg is going to have hip extension, knee extension, plantar flexion. They're not going to ask you like what those terms are. They're just going to ask you, your client is sprinting, the front side mechanics would be which of the following. So on 290, just know that. It's good to flashcard agility, which is the ability to start and accelerate, stop. Quickness is to change direction in all planes of motion. They love on 293, follow the snake. It's great for elderly people to do. Red light, green light for older. On 295 would be for elderly people. Sorry, stand up to figure 8 is great for seniors. My apologies. 293, follow the snake would be good for kids. Younger for kids, 295, stand up to figure 8 for elderly. That would be like maybe 2-3 questions max in chapter 12. Chapter 13, if you want to just know general adaptation syndrome, all great stuff. Dr. Hans Seeley was a Canadian endocrinologist, and he came up with the alarm, reaction, exhaustion. If you want flashcards, those are interesting things to know. Periodization is just the changing of variables over time. You have mechanical specificity, which is the load. Neuromuscular is going to be the speed. And then metabolic would be the demands inside, which would be like metabolic stress. Don't worry about this stuff for now because we're going to get into the types of system. Just know for 316, no PHA. Peripheral heart action is what you should use for people who have high blood pressure. Vertical loading is used in phase 1. Everything else is horizontal loading. Anything with a stability ball, stabilization. I would bet my life that if you didn't even read the question, and if you see a stability ball squat curl press, that will be the answer. They love that fucking answer. So always choose stability ball squat curl press. If you want to go through the exercises just for the names for your own sake, that's fine. So for example, 335, if you didn't know what a single leg dumbbell scaption was and you didn't know that it was a shoulder exercise, you're going to miss that one. If you didn't know what a what's the other one? Oh, that's it. Chapter 14, big portion, the acute variables. All right, so with chapter 14, I'm going to skip a lot of it because I'm going to show you what you just need to memorize. On page 370, just know table 14.7, all of the variables for resistance. So you need to know the reps, 12 to 20, the sets, 1 to 3, the tempo, 4 to 1, intensity, 50 to 70, rest interval, 0 to 90. So again, I told you this kid that recently passed, this is what you need to know as I stress in the guide. I asked him, I said, if your client is in stabilization, what is the tempo? And he's like, I think it's 202. That's a really, really, really simple question. And if you're missing that, then you're not going to pass the test because the majority of the questions are going to be off of acute variables, chapter 6, chapter 7. So know the resistance portion. The exercise for plyometrics, 3 to 5 seconds. Know that. Vertical loading. So you do A, B, C, D, E, F, rest. Go back up, A, B, C, D, no 4, 2, 1. 372, the only thing you need to know about phase 2 is supersets. Bench press into a push-up. Squat into a step-up. Pull up into a single arm row. Military press into a scaption. That's what you need to know for phase 2. Phase 3, 6 to 12 reps. 3 to 5 sets. 75 to 85% for intensity. 0 to 60 seconds rest. That's for NASM. Know that that is greatly outdated. If you want to optimize hypertrophy, 0 to 60 seconds should only be utilized at the end due to metabolic stress. You want to rest longer. 3 minutes is superior to 2 minutes, and there's a lot of research out there that supports it. Dr. Schoenfeld is one of the leading researchers in the world. Read his book, Hypertrophy. That's a million times better than this chapter. Phase 4, just know when you get to resistance, 1 to 5 reps, 4 to 6 sets, tempos XXX, 85 to 100%, 379. You're going to have supersets for resistance. So it'd be like a bench press into a plyo push-up, a squat into a jump. And that's what you need to know for chapter 14. So just memorize those acute variables. Chapter 15. Any questions so far?
Yeah, man, I'm sorry, I'm probably pausing like crazy.
No, not at all. I love questions.
The one I was looking at in that chapter, my buddy and I just talked, he just took the test as well. He passed it. Is that the same as table 14.1 on 360? All the things you just told us?
Yeah.
All right. Just that same thing?
Yeah, but some people just, they get confused because it doesn't give you the phase. So how they're going to ask the test question is going to be which phase the OPT model is going to be 12 to 20 repetitions. 1, 2, 3, or 4. So this just doesn't tell you the phase. So this is fine. Just memorize that. You're good. I like that. That's but just know the phase number.
Okay.
Did your buddy pass?
Oh, yeah. He's a smart dude. Yeah, he passed. He said it wasn't as bad. He said you hit the nail on the head with, he's actually the reason I found you stuff. I found another guy and he kind of sucked.
Who was that?
I don't know, Fitness Mentors, I think is his name.
That's good to know. You didn't like them.
It wasn't bad. I just, this thing was a lot more helpful. I got this and I'm good.
Nice. When do you plan on taking the test?
Probably the end of next week. I've been going pretty good for about 2 weeks now. So.
Nice. You feeling pretty comfortable with it?
Yeah, I took the NASM course online, which took way longer than I needed to, but what's making me do it?
What score are you getting on those final exams?
The ones for Fitness Mentor, I'm all 80 or above. The ones on the NASM one, I haven't even taken one yet.
Okay. Take one of those, the final ones, and if you're getting above, like the first time you take it, if you get above an 80, then you'll be good to go.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Yep. So chapter 15, not too much in this one. If you want to know like a progression from, a lot of this is how NASA makes their money. So 403, no closed kinetic chain, open kinetic chain. So essentially like a leg extension will be open. A squat would be closed, a push-up would be closed, a bench press would be open. When your distal region is moving, it's going to be open. When your distal region is not moving, it's closed. So like a chin-up, I'm holding it, I'm pulling up, so my hands aren't moving. That's going to be closed. Whereas like a lat pull down, I pull the bar to my chest. That's going to be moving, therefore it's open. Vibration plates, I'm pretty sure that they sponsor NASM because those things are idiotic. Chapter 16, just know with seniors, stand up to figure 8. They love that one. Obesity, BMI greater than 30. 4 out of 5 Americans have low back pain, which is 80%. 70% of Americans are overweight. Type 2 diabetes is insulin deficient, no, not insulin deficient, insulin resistant. That's on page 429. Type 1 is self-induced, that's genetic. Type 2 is reversible, type 1 is not. Hypertension 140/90, you want to do PHA on that one. Valsalva maneuvers, holding your breath, so if you have someone who has high blood pressure, you wouldn't want to do that. Notice how ironic that is. On page 435, she's doing the standing cable rotation, but she's not having the rotation which you need. But that's NASM for you. So that is osteopenia, osteoporosis 440. That is bone health. Osteoporosis is worse than osteopenia. Who are some people you do not want to foam roll? Pregnancy, type 2, varicose veins, and cancer. That's a question they may ask you for chapter 16, who you would not want to foam roll. Varicose veins, type 2, cancer, and pregnancy. Alrighty, nutrition, they're not going to ask you a lot, maybe 2 questions, maybe 4 max, because they want you to get their fitness nutrition specialist. Don't get it, you don't need it. Don't get the new precision nutrition one. You can do a simple course like ours. It's not even simple. We go into the body mass equation where you look at stress and sleep and how to do macros. And that's only $100 a month, and you would be significantly saving money, whereas you can still call yourself a nutritionist. So the precision nutrition, that stuff is just overvalued. If you work at Equinox, get it because you get it for free. Otherwise, you don't need to do that stuff. Protein, know the range, 10 to 35%. Fat, 20 to 35. Carbs, 45 to 65. Fiber, 38 grams for males, 25 for females. Glucose to glycogen. Glucose is readily available. Glycogen is stored. And that water, they like the question about, here, 490. They like asking about 3 liters for males, 13 cups, 2.2 for females, 9 cups. There you go. On 492, they highlight that. Nothing special about any diet. It's about creating a deficit. Supplementation by law, they can't ask you anything in here, so they're not going to see a single question from supplementation. The one they can't ask you because it's not illegal is caffeine. So they can ask you about one thing, which is right 516, 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram per body weight. That's the only question by law that they can ask you. They can't ask you anything else. They'll get in trouble. So NASM has a whole legal team, so they're not going to shit the bed on that one. So yeah, that's all you need to know for supplementation. Now 19 and 20, I would encourage you to go through. Read that because they ask a bunch of questions that you may not be familiar with, especially if you have some experience as a just trainer or working out at the gym. Some of the stuff is NASM specific, but know the stages of change. So 1 is you have no intent on exercising, no intention of changing. Stage 2, you are thinking about exercise. Stage 3, you are exercising, but you're not doing it regularly. Stage 4, you are active, but you're not doing it for 6 months. Stage 5, you are finally doing it for 6 months. And then termination, which they don't even have in here, but they will ask you about termination. And that's where you won't even think about it because it's been longer than a year. And active listening, we're asking questions, asking permission. They like stuff in there about that. Time, lack of support. SMART goals, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. Self-monitoring, psyching up, positive self-talk, imagery, they like that stuff, 546. And my favorite, 551, the importance of education. Currently, there are no government regulations that require personal trainers to earn a certification or college degree. Right out of the horse's mouth. You do not need a cert, only if your gym that you want to work at requires it. As we grow our brand, we're going to get into the Bay Area in the beginning of 2021. We're getting into Texas, we're getting into Vegas. We want to start moving back east. I'm going to pride ourselves in, I don't want our trainers to be certified because it's just going to kind of shock people. Like, well, what do you mean you need to be certified? Certifications are just a piece of paper. There's nothing wrong with it. If you get it, great, but it doesn't validate you as a great trainer. You need to gain experience. You need to have people supervise you. You need to give people a program that you have for someone and get some feedback. Is this good? Is this bad? Why am I doing this exercise? Why am I not doing this exercise? They love the 4 Ps of marketing on 557. Product, price, place, promotion. You should add in another one just for your own sense if you do think about opening up your own gym. Parking is huge. People will not come to your gym if you do not have parking. 2.0 units or 20 hours of CEUs, 563. I like asking that question. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen. They're not going to do anything in chapters or the appendix A, B, C, or D. Don't worry about that stuff. They're not going to quiz you. I will say, though, on page 590, they do like ball combo 1 and 2, and that is a shoulder stabilization exercise. So if you didn't know that, you would not get that question properly right. 47 minutes. The textbook is complete. You guys have any questions on anything that you want to go over? Feel free to shoot me an email or text or anything. You guys should all have my number. I try to send you a text message after you get the study guide. What words do I need to know in Chapter 7? You need to know relative flexibility, synergistic dominance, autogenic inhibition, altered reciprocal inhibition, muscle spindle, Golgi tendon, Davies test. So you will pass. Go into the exam knowing you will pass. If you miss a question, who gives a shit? It's 1 out of 120. You will pass. Move on. Just keep on getting the bulk of it. 6, 7, 14. Know that stuff, and you will do great. When you're done, reach out to me. If you want to sit in the class for a week, I'm more than happy to send you our Zoom codes so you can listen to the classes tomorrow at 8 a.m. Cali time. We'll be doing a social media review. Danny helps you guys grow your social media. She did a great job of helping us grow our social media from 700 followers on YouTube. Now we're over at 5,100, I think. And that's going to help with growing side streams of revenue because we want to make money while we're sleeping, right? Any other questions? No? All right, guys. Well, and ladies, enjoy the rest of your night and have a good one. Hey, look at these guys. We're in the Bay Area. We want to go to San Jose. What fitness books do you recommend for my own knowledge? Check out Glute book by Brett Contreras. Check out Eric Cressy, Stability. He has some good videos that you can watch on that. Dean Somerset and Tony Gentilcore, they have some good stuff. You guys have any questions here on YouTube? We'll post this in there as well. Comments. Live chat. I don't know how to read these. Sorry, but just throw in a question if you guys have any. When it comes to the NASM, pass that shit, move on, get some experience. Got to show up with my crooked shirt. Any other questions? All right, guys. Have a great rest of the day. We'll see you.